Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Henderson, and I'm a solicitor working at the Immigrant Council of Ireland Independent Law Centre. We provide legal advice, assistance and representation to migrants and prioritise working with certain categories of vulnerable migrants where we as an organisation are aware of serious unmet legal needs. One of the groups which falls into this category and that the Immigrant Council has been at the forefront of working to support is trafficked migrant women, and especially women who have been trafficked for the purposes of sexual exploitation. The aim of the Assist project was to provide gender-specific legal advice to at least 10 third-country national women in this category, and during the past 18 months we've been able to achieve and exceed that target. The solicitors, we are only two, Catherine Cosgrave and myself, have at the last count delivered gender-specific legal advice, assistance, support or representation to over 25 women. The files open for clients' applications have ranged from initial legal advice appointments to full representation in applications to the Department of Justice. And I will elaborate a little bit more on some of the casework that's involved shortly. Building on the extensive experience of the organisation, the work with the solicitors who've been at the Immigrant Council before me, in coordination with Catherine, who has been at the forefront of this work, from information sharing with our EU and UK partners in the project, and from the cases that we have dealt with, there are a number of best practices that we're putting forward that ought to be met when considering legal assistance to third-country national women who have been trafficked for the purposes of sexual exploitation. Firstly, from the best practices identified, it is imperative that free, independent and early legal advice can be provided to women victims of trafficking. Free is self-explanatory, but by independent and early, I mean very clearly that a trafficked third-country national woman should be able to access legal advice before presenting to the policing or investigating authorities. At the moment, the Immigrant Council is providing this service to women who either seek our advice or who more usually are referred to us for this purpose, to gain an understanding of their rights and entitlements before they launch themselves into what can be a very difficult and sometimes traumatic system. The benefit of early legal advice is that women can then make an informed choice about the options that are available to her. During the course of this project, women who have been provided with early legal advice have made different decisions for a myriad of different reasons. Some have opted to seek international protection, some have opted to seek a residence permission on the basis of being a victim of human trafficking, and some have opted to return to their country of origin. I can make no judgment on which is the most appropriate course of action for a woman to choose, but when they have been given holistic, comprehensive legal advice from the outset, I am assured that they are making the best choice for themselves. One tool to facilitate the provision of early legal advice is early identification, and identification by authorities other than the Gardaí or investigating bodies. Minimising the conditions around accessing support is necessary. Early identification as a victim of trafficking that permits access to services, be it medical, psychological, or material needs such as accommodation and food, will work towards facilitating disclosure and ultimately assist timely and efficient investigation of crime. When legal advice is provided, it must be gender sensitive. It is our experience that a woman victim of sexual exploitation is more comfortable disclosing their story and addressing their needs in the presence of women. Beyond the legal advisor being a woman, there must also be an awareness of the additional needs that arise to women, both because of harms they have suffered and also from their role as mothers. Women who are sexually exploited have experienced extreme and repeated sexual violence and should be provided with appropriate access to healthcare, psychosocial support, and appropriate and safe accommodation. Minimising re-traumatisation is really important. The legal advisor to a woman victim of trafficking needs to take a holistic approach and work closely with the support workers and state agencies who are dealing with clients. In this regard, it is important to have as much information as possible provided by referring agencies or support workers. Her formal statements has been provided to investigating authorities or other state agencies, it is one of the greatest tools available to reduce the requirements for a woman to retell her story repeatedly and minimize re-traumatization that she may experience. Women who are mothers are often only concerned with the safety of their children and seeking to be reunified with them. Legal support to assist with family reunification or discretionary visas where there is no entitlement to family reunification must be available. It is the accepted policy of the Department of Justice that family reunification facilitates integration, and this must equally be applied to women who have survived trafficking for sexual exploitation. Legal assistance and support must take account of all a woman's legal needs, to include advice on international protection, on immigration matters, on identity issues, on family reunification, and where it may be relevant, on age assessments, on prosecution systems, on access to compensation, and then as well as legal advice on related matters, such as access to material and social benefits. Having this type of practice in place ensures that best practices can be observed, and it is an additional level of safeguarding for the state authorities. Some issues cannot be solved by legal advice or representation alone, but an awareness of what can be addressed with legal support and how it should be addressed are essential. Legal support must be ongoing and continuous. This facilitates integration because it means a woman can access all that they are entitled to, which then enables them to overcome the administrative hurdles they may face as a survivor of trafficking and deal with getting on with their lives. We have survivor clients who we are currently assisting with citizenship applications. From a legal perspective, they are on the last stretch of their integration journey, but yet they still have to represent themselves to yet another unit of the Department of Justice as having been a victim of trafficking. Having a legal advisor who's aware of a woman's journey can make that last stretch a little easier. So rather than list off the failings that I've encountered during this project, and sadly there are some, I want to look at what I consider a good example of how a case played out. A client was referred early last year for initial legal advice on her options arising from trafficking, which she had escaped. Following initial advice, she then chose to make an initial complaint to the Gardaí and seek to be granted an initial reflection and recovery period. With the support of a Rahama caseworker, that was facilitated very efficiently. However, that was at the beginning of COVID restrictions, and her initial reception into the national referral mechanism coincided with the New World Order. She was accommodated in a rural location, somewhat isolated, and as a result had limited access to shops that sold the food she used to. All her meals were provided, but she was diabetic, and she had ongoing small complaints at her place of accommodation about the food. She was tired, she was unhappy. It was a frightening time, and especially so for somebody with an underlying health condition. These issues played on her mind, made her more concerned for her health, and were worrying her significantly. They were also serving as a distraction to her focusing on recovery, on engaging with me as her legal advisor, and on making any first steps towards integration. She didn't think she needed legal advice about her food, but it was a genuine issue of access to appropriate material support. But more importantly, she needed recognition, and recognizing that she could raise complaints about these issues. And so when that information was provided to her, she engaged with her support workers, and then on her own with the management of her accommodation centre. And she successfully advocated for a change in the types of meals being offered and assisted both herself and other residents at her accommodation to access better and more suitable living conditions. For the same client, I attended at the initial provision of statements to the police. She had chosen to make a formal statement and wanted to do it as quickly as possible. The lockdown restrictions put extra constraints on the police, but we were able to advocate for the formal taking of the statement to eventually be arranged. At the first meeting for statement giving, the policemen followed a really good path. They allowed periods for breaks. They put a limit on the time that they would spend taking the statement, so as not to exhaust her. Although some advocacy was required to get it set up, In dealing with the taking of the statement, I can honestly say that the police are seeking to apply a best practice approach. I hope that example is an indicator of things to come. Legal assistance must include advice on international protection, on residence permission, and on other immigration issues, such as family reunification, and on access to advice on age assessment, compensation, and prosecutorial systems, as well as advice on related matters, such as access to support and material social benefits. Having these practices in place ensures that there is an additional level of safeguarding for the state authorities. Applying a holistic approach means ensuring that your client knows that they have a range of legal rights, not just the right to be recognised as a victim, or to gain access to a residence permission, but to access the other supports that are available for them. For a woman to know that she can ask for a certain type of food, or that she can take breaks when she's given information, might seem small, but they are concrete indicators to that woman that she can ask to access her other rights and seek that they are realised, so that she can be provided with what she needs to recover and integrate. And that could equally be access to appropriate psychosocial support, to safe accommodation, or to healthcare. And it is important that as a legal advisor to women victims of trafficking, that it must be understood that when a woman says she's tired and couldn't eat breakfast, that you ask to listen to what she is saying. We strive to achieve these best practices in the delivery of legal services, but there is always room for improvement. More importantly, it is essential to measure activities with reference to best practice to ensure a rights-based approach is adopted and that the client at the heart of any service has all their needs met.